They took my house key the day I moved out, so I took back the key to their future. The morning I moved out, my mother didn't cry, she didn't hug me. She stood in the doorway holding a brown envelope. Inside were my baby photos, a broken locket, and a note. Now that you're independent, you won't be needing these. The moment felt surgical, precise, a clean emotional severing disguised as grace. She handed me the envelope and then reached out, not to hold me, but to take my key, the house key I had carried since I was 16, my first real symbol of trust. She didn't even flinch. I stood there, suitcase in hand, keyless, stunned. I was 29, not a runaway. I had given them a month's notice, paid rent every month I'd lived there, helped with groceries, bills and yard work, but apparently I was now a liability, a risk to their illusion of control. No ceremony, no farewell dinner, not even a good luck, Chloe. Just the silent clang of metal against her palm and the look in her eyes that said, "Don't think you're coming back." I walked down the driveway with my life in boxes. Dad watched from the porch, but didn't say a word. Ethan didn't even come outside. The same family that clung to me when they needed money or favors now tossed me like I was just passing through. They treated my departure like betrayal, not adulthood. I moved into a small apartment across town, nothing fancy, but mine. The silence was thick at first, not peaceful, just unfamiliar. I kept expecting to hear Mom's footsteps, Dad's TV, Ethan's music, but there was only me and the dull ache of being disowned in plain sight. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from my parents. Not a card, not a "we miss you," a formal request. They wanted me to review their retirement documents and set up auto payments for their joint account. "Since you're so good with money now." I read it 3 times, not because it was complicated, but because I was stunned. They had taken my keys, my history, my name from the mailbox, and now they wanted my help managing the life they planned to retire into. I stared at the old Cayenne. I still had the anchor, a family heirloom Dad gave me when I started driving, to remind you that you're part of something bigger. That anchor was now detached, like me. That's when something shifted, not anger, not sadness, just a clear, sharp line. A quiet knowing that the door they slammed wouldn't reopen. Not this time. Growing up in the Reynolds house meant following rules wrapped in concern. I couldn't sleep over at friends' houses because you never know what goes on. I couldn't pick my own clothes past middle school. Mom said it was for modesty, but it always felt like shame. Dad never contradicted her. He played the good cop, soft-spoken, detached, the kind of man who would help fix your bike but never ask how your heart was doing. His way of parenting was making sure the thermostat worked and the bills got paid. Ethan got more freedom, but also less expectation. He didn't need to check in, didn't get lectured about curfews or grades. Mom said he was figuring things out. I had to have a 5-year plan by 17. I was the one who kept things running quietly, helped with taxes, groceries, Dad's spreadsheets. I stayed close, not because they asked, but because leaving felt like betrayal. They made sure of that. My role in the family wasn't daughter. It was unpaid intern every time I tried to carve space for myself. They guilted me. When I got a scholarship offer out of state, Mom cried, said, "We can't handle the house without you." So I stayed, took a local job, told myself I was being mature. They never said thank you, but they always said, "We need you." There's a different sand. I lived inside it. Even when I moved out, I wasn't fleeing. I told them a month in advance, bought my own boxes, cleaned every room before I left. I thought doing it right would protect me from being punished. But that's the thing with families like mine, they don't punish with yelling. They punish with silence, with keys taken without warning, with traditions that suddenly don't include you. The day after I moved out, Mom removed me from the family group chat. No explanation. Just gone, as if removing me digitally would erase the fact that I had lived every second of my 20s in service to them. They raised me to be useful, then resented me for needing to leave. I still sent a text to Dad on his birthday. Got a thanks. No emoji, no question back. Ethan posted a photo of the 3 of them at Sunday dinner, my old spot at the table already filled with one of his friends, like I had never existed. Even in my absence, they found a way to make me feel too much, too distant, too dramatic, too selfish for finally choosing myself. I held the anchor Cayenne often that month. It felt heavier than before. I had once believed it tied me to them. Now I saw it for what it was, a weight I mistook for belonging. The red flags weren't big. They were quiet, daily, like how mom would double-check my bank statements even after I turned 25, or how she kept a spare key just in case. Even though I never asked her to watch the house, when I started dating someone serious, she asked, "Are you sure you're not just trying to escape us?" It wasn't curiosity, it was warning. A way of reminding me that love elsewhere was a threat to her control. Dad once told me, "Your mom just wants to know you're safe," but safety in their house meant obedience. It meant staying under their roof, under their eyes, under their version of who I was allowed to be. Ethan never had to explain his choices. He could come and go, change jobs, skip birthdays. When he missed mom's anniversary dinner, she said he's busy. When I once forgot to RSVP, I got a full voicemail about disrespect. Their grace had conditions, mine was expected by default. After I moved out, they started using language like "we just need a little help." They never said please, never acknowledged that I was building my own life. It was always, "You're good with numbers, Chloe, set up our investments. Pay the property tax this year, you know what to do." At first, I did it, out of habit. Then came the email about the retirement plan. Full spreadsheets attached, documents for review, and a note, "We're counting on you," not asking, counting, like I was a guarantee. I stared at the email for hours. Not because I didn't know how to do it, but because I finally realized how many years I had done everything without question, without consent, without credit. I thought about how they had removed my name from the will when I was 23 because I wasn't ready. Yet here they were, expecting me to guard their finances. The anchor keychain sat on my desk. I hadn't put it on my new keys. It felt dishonest. It didn't symbolize grounding anymore. It symbolized weight. They wanted me to be responsible, but only when it benefited them. I called a financial advisor, not for them, for me, asked questions about boundaries, about legal options, about what I was and wasn't obligated to do. She said, "You're not their trustee, Chloe, you're their daughter." That's not the same. I hung up and cried, because no one had ever drawn that line for me before. That night, I made a folder titled, "Locks I'm Changing." Inside, every document they sent, every request, every email I never agreed to answer, and in a separate envelope, I slid the anchor keychain. I was done being their anchor. The betrayal didn't come as a slap. It came as a family group email one I was copied into by accident. The subject line read, "Chloe and the retirement issue." I stared at it for 10 full minutes before opening it. In the thread, Mom wrote, "I don't understand why she's being so difficult. She's always been dramatic when she doesn't get her way. I'm starting to think she's doing this to punish us for asking for help." Dad replied, "She's just proving she wasn't ready to be trusted. Let's loop in Ethan. He can figure it out without the emotion." They had reduced me to a tantrum, dismissed my silence as rebellion, assigned Ethan to take over. As if I had failed some unspoken test of loyalty. I wasn't their daughter. I was a service that expired. What cut deepest wasn't their plan, it was the tone. The ease with which they turned me into the problem, the absence of any mention of how I had helped them for years, the lack of any single sentence that said, "We might have hurt her." Ethan eventually wrote, "Just send me the login info. She clearly doesn't want to be part of this family anymore." I wanted to scream, but instead, I closed the laptop and sat in silence. The words were louder than shouting. And for the first time in my life, I didn't try to fix it. I didn't respond. That night, I walked through my apartment and took inventory, not of things but of what I'd carried, their bills, their stress, their expectations. I saw it everywhere. In the quiet fridge, in the unopened mail, in the way I still checked my phone at 6 p.m. like Mom would text me what's for dinner. I hadn't just moved out. I had unspooled myself from an identity built around being useful. They never saw me, just what I could handle for them. The next week, Ethan messaged me directly, "Mom's upset. She thinks you're trying to freeze them out of everything. You know they need this help." And that's when the quiet betrayal turned into something worse. They had assumed that because I had knowledge, I owed them access. Because I had skill, I owed them labor. Because I had love once, I had to keep proving it. I didn't respond to Ethan either. I forwarded the entire email thread to my financial advisor, asked her what I was legally responsible for. The answer, nothing. The same family that took my key now resented me for changing the lock. So I did something symbolic. I printed the email thread, hole punched it, and placed it inside a folder titled Unpaid Invoices. Then I slipped the anchor keychain between the pages and closed it. Let them feel what absence really costs. It hit me a week later while doing dishes. Of all things, the water was hot, my playlist was on shuffle, and then out of nowhere, I broke, my hands froze, the plates clinked too loud. And I just sank to the floor. I sat there, knees to my chest, crying over a sink full of soap and silence. Not because I missed them, but because I finally accepted the truth. They were never going to be the people I thought they could be. Grief isn't always about death. Sometimes it's about realizing your parents won't show up for you, not ever. Not at graduation. Not at your first apartment. Not when you're finally brave enough to say no. They were proud of my skills but ashamed of my boundaries. I stopped answering texts from extended family, the cousins who said, "You know your mom means well," the aunts who liked to say, "Family is complicated." No one asked if I was okay. They just wanted me to smooth it over so they could be comfortable again. I looked at the unopened retirement folder on my table. I had planned to scan and finalize the documents. Instead, I slid them into a drawer. I couldn't bring myself to shred them, but I knew I'd never open them again. The anchor cane stayed on my windowsill. Some nights, I'd hold it and wonder if I'd made it all up. If I was too sensitive, if maybe I should have just done what they asked. But then I'd remember the email, the words, the feeling of being erased so easily. The worst part wasn't the betrayal, it was how unsurprising it felt, like a script I'd already read. My therapist said, "You're grieving who you had to be to stay close to them." I didn't even realize I had been performing. But now that I'd stopped, I felt it in my bones how much of me was built for their comfort. They didn't lose me when I moved out. They lost me when they demanded access to a life they never helped me build. I stopped attending Sunday dinners. I didn't explain, didn't fight, just disappeared from the calendar. Weeks passed. No one called to ask why. That silence hurt more than any argument could have. But it was also proof that their love was never rooted in me, it was rooted in what I could give. So I took my name off every shared account, unlinked my information, changed every password. I wasn't just locking them out, I was locking me in. And for the first time, the silence felt like protection. Freedom didn't come like thunder, it came in quiet moments, in waking up without dread, in choosing curtains without imagining my mother's judgment, in arranging my space how I liked it. No approval, no eyes watching. I started journaling, not about them, but about me, what I liked, what I feared, what I missed that didn't hurt. I wrote, "I am not the one who left, I'm the one who was let go," and something in me shifted. I reread old texts, old emails, not to wallow, but to study, to understand how long I had accepted obligation as affection. I highlighted every sentence that ended with guilt. The page was nearly yellow. My piece wasn't loud, but it was finally mine. One weekend, I built a budget for myself, not for my family, not for Ethan's emergencies, just me. I listed what made me feel alive: plants, books, the quiet hum of a record player. I funded my joy. With my own hands, I joined a local women's finance group, not because I needed help, but because I wanted to see other women who had also said no. One of them looked me in the eye and said, "Just because you're capable doesn't mean you owe them everything." That sentence became my screensaver. I went for long walks without my phone. I stopped checking if my mom had posted anything. I let go of the fantasy that she might apologize. Not because she couldn't, but because I finally accepted she wouldn't. I took the anchor cane, polished it gently, and placed it on a shelf. No longer a chain, now, just a relic. I started drafting a new financial plan, not for their retirement, for mine, and in the middle of it, I laughed. Because it felt like I was finally setting my own future into motion. They took my key, but I kept the lock. I hosted a dinner for friends in my tiny apartment. No speeches, just laughter, candles, stories. After dessert, someone said, "This place feels like you." I almost cried, because I realized it was. I emailed my former professor and pitched a piece. When family debt isn't just about money, she accepted it for publication the next week. I didn't write it to get back at them, I wrote it to remind myself I exist outside of their shadow, and for the first time, I stopped thinking about what I owed them and started focusing on what I deserved. They didn't notice the shift at first. That's the thing about people who only see what you do for them. They don't feel the absence until they need something, and by then, you're already gone. 2 months after I moved out, Dad emailed me the subject line, "Retirement update, need your signature." I didn't open it. I forwarded it to a lawyer I had hired quietly and added a single sentence, "Please redirect all requests." Mom called that evening. I let it ring. She left a voicemail, her voice clipped, cold. "We've done everything for you, and now this is how you repay us." They raised me for compliance. I answered with silence. Ethan texted 3 days later, "You're being petty. You know they don't understand this stuff." But that's just it. I had always made everything understandable for them. Translated, absorbed, fixed. Not anymore. My lawyer sent a formal letter outlining my lack of legal obligation. It was clean, respectful, final. That silence afterward. It was the sound of control unraveling. I changed the beneficiary on my accounts, took them off emergency contact forms, created my own trust. I didn't tell them, I just did it. I used to feel guilty for protecting myself, now I felt strategic. They taught me responsibility. So I used it to lock them out. The blog post went viral. Women wrote to me in whispers and paragraphs, sisters, daughters, even some mothers who said, "I didn't know how deep I was hurting my own child." A podcast invited me to speak. I told the story. Not as revenge but as recovery. I shared about the keys, the lock, the silence that saved me. One host said, "You didn't walk away, you reclaimed your door." The most poetic moment came when I got an email from Mom, weeks later. Subject line, "Chloe, we saw the article." No apology, no questions, just a vague line, "We hope you're happy with what you've done." I smiled, closed the laptop, and opened my window. That night, I placed the Anchor Cane in a shadow box framed next to a printed copy of the podcast episode and my bank statement titled, "Independent Accounts." Let that be their retirement plan. Freedom wasn't a banner I waved, it was a series of closed tabs, locked drawers, and days that started with my own name. I no longer woke up waiting for their version of me to shrink. I simply expanded. I painted my door deep navy blue, no one's favorite color but mine, a small rebellion in wood and finish. Every time I turned the key, it reminded me, this is yours, they can't take it. I stopped tracking their birthdays, not out of spite, but because that calendar had expired. I no longer lived by their clock. My time was finally my own. They removed me from their future, so I removed them from mine. At the end of that year, I got a promotion, one I hadn't told anyone in my family about. I celebrated with friends, not expectations. I wore a gold dress, drank a glass of champagne, and toasted to boundaries that bought me back my life. No one clapped out of duty. Every cheer felt earned. I changed my voicemail to, "If this is Chloe's parents, please contact legal representation." I laughed when I recorded it. Not because I expected them to call, but because it felt like armor I no longer needed. But still wore proudly. I updated my will, created my own trust, listed a friend as executor. I left a note inside the folder. "This legacy is not for those who never saw me." The Anchor Cane stayed in the shadow box, beside it. I placed my apartment key, cut fresh, independent, without copies handed out. That was the final symbol, one they'd never hold again. I wrote a final blog post. "Some keys aren't meant to be returned." In it, I said, the lock was never the problem. It was who kept demanding access without permission. They gave me a childhood of control. I gave myself a future of peace. The last time I drove past their house, I didn't slow down. I didn't look for familiar windows. I didn't wonder who was sitting in my old chair. That version of me stayed behind. I now live in a place with no spare keys. No apologies mailed too late, no demands wrapped in duty, just space, breath, ownership. And when I close my door each night, I smile. Not because I won, but because they lost the right to walk through it. They took my house key, so I changed the locks on their retirement and on my life.